Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Propagandacast with me, ImperialDane, your wonderful host, and the guy you love more than anything else. Well, probably not. In fact, I wager it's quite the opposite, but I do hope you enjoy my cast. So here we have another one, a 1 versus 1 on Langres. And you might be saying, well, Dane, didn't we just have a 1 versus 1 on Langres yesterday? And I might add, yes, we did, but this one is going to be slightly different. First off, we're going to be seeing as the Axis. My goodness, it's our favorite friend ImperialDane, or at least my favorite friend ImperialDane, as the Panzer Elite. My goodness, I'm already sure some of you are awfully excited. But here he is, ImperialDane's 2nd Panzer Division, and yes indeed I seem to have something for the 2nd Panzer Division all of a sudden. Might because I read about them a bit in Normandy Front, a rather exciting book, or at least a rather interesting book on the Germans in Normandy. Rather unlike the book The Germans in Normandy by Robert Hargreaves, which I think should have been titled differently, but this is not a book review. This is a cast, and of course 2nd Panzer Division, Ausklaurung Abteilung, and who shall they be facing? They shall be facing JoelTurner, and I don't have a level for him. I'm afraid he was playing as a Smurf, but as you might see, he actually knew quite a bit as playing as the American, so I'm pretty sure he's going to be pretty highly ranked, at least around level 11-12. And I am level 11 as the Panzer Elite, although I'm somewhere currently in the top 300, I believe. Anyhows, of course, I'm pretty sure you are aware of Langres. 3 victory points on a row. Roads bisecting the map. We are seeing some strategic points here and there, cutting off the fuel and munition points, which are rather nestled in between all of this. In fact, we have a munitions point high right there, nestled in rather closely between 2 victory strategic points. Awfully close to the southern player's base, and of course he can hold it rather nicely from here, but at the same time, if he does advance his defenses here, he will run into a problem. Let's say someone can lob a grenade over that piece of bocage and right into that building, or sneak through here, of course. So there are some disadvantages in trying to hold it, but it's still reasonably defensible. But of course, most of the fighting usually tends to happen right here, since this is the 2 shortest points between the bases, or the shortest point between the 2 bases. Now I'm messing about a bit there, my apologies. So of course you usually see most of the fighting here. You rarely see that all of the fighting shifts around here, unless in some cases that the British player has sort of dug in right here, and of course is proving to be quite a nuisance. Then most of the fighting will shift towards there, but usually there's that, it's right here. Of course I do have a match in fact where this happens, but it's a rather short one, and well, I'd rather wait with that one perhaps to when we have when I have 600 subscribers, which I do lack 50 subscribers more for. So of course invite your friends and all that, and of course we can quickly reach that bit. Anyhow, let's stop babbling and let's get to watching the fighting. We can't actually fight, and I just realized, of course, I forgot to turn down the volume. My apologies. A bit hot here, and of course I'm slightly trying to change things about and how I record and process all of this to perhaps get something a bit better, and perhaps sort of change things about a bit. So we'll have to see if this results in something slightly more entertaining for you wonderful people out there on the great wide internet all over the world. Panzer Grenadiers on the way. Panzer Grenadiers always nice to have. Some of the best German troops in the war. Although of course I suppose there would have been some exception, but still they were usually among the best. And of course the German army rather actually graded troops, and of course differentiated them between divisions and what was needed, sort of actually like how you would see them actually nowadays in video games, you know, low quality troops, then high quality, medium, and then high quality. So actually a bit fun. And Panzer Grenadiers would have been rated among the higher quality troops, SS troops even higher, Grenadiers in between, although they could also be in the bottom of it. Fortress troops were generally not considered the best, and in fact considered pretty trash, but figured that in a good defensive position they would be able to hold out, and Volksgrenadiers were also sort of that, although there were some high hopes in how they could perform. But Panzer Grenadiers were pretty decent troops. Gewehr 43s should be on the way. Come on Dane, get some Gewehr 43s, you know you need them, you stupid bastard. But no, apparently he has better things for. And engaging some riflemen right here. Riflemen in heavy cover, and of course what do I do? Do I A, charge them, or B, figure out to get to them rather than exposing my troops out in the open, and of course switch around, ignore them, and rather notice there's a target of opportunity here. Engineers, and of course sometimes if you're encountering a hard point and you figure that it might be too hard to actually engage it from the front, ignore it and try, for example, looking for something a bit softer, or, for example, here, now I'm actually getting around it and attacking it from slightly different angle, and of course he's having a harder time holding up there, and now his troops are actually a lot more exposed. Of course, this force to sort of pull back, but at the same time I am able to get a bit closer, and of course now there's a piece of heavy cover much closer to his troops, which of course is going to give me an advantage, and right there one rifleman goes down. Third Panzer Grenadier team is out and putting down the Kampfgruppe Company. I rather like getting the Kampfgruppe Company because then I can get half tracks, and my goodness, I like actually using my Panzer Grenadiers as Panzer Grenadiers, not just expensive elite troops. Engineers and riflemen moving in, and what do I do here? I of course realize that I'm not going to win this fight, so I immediately retreat rather than waste valuable Panzer Grenadiers on such a lopsided fight, since my Panzer Grenadiers are already slightly beaten up, and I'd rather get them back and get ready for something else, like say a infantry half-track and some Panzer Grenadiers, and of course getting some bloody Gewehr 43s for my troops. The Gewehr 43 being a semi-automatic rifle. Of course the German army weren't able to equip all troops, so they were partly given out in larger numbers to reconnaissance units, because they were expected to have a lot more firepower at the front, since they also expected to work a bit more independently. But a usual grenadier team would also have one equipped per squad. It would usually be the second in command of the squad that would have it, and so usually they would split up in two teams, I believe, and of course one team would have an MP40 and the other squad, the secondary squad leader, would then have the Gewehr 43 to sort of boost the firepower for that team. So that of course is a bit fun of Wehrmacht unit organization, and engineers running straight into the Gewehr 43, and one is of course dropped right dead there, rather realizing that Gewehr 43s is not good for his health. Riflemen holding up behind these haystacks, looks like further getting up, looks like we might be seeing some jump off positions for an assault or a counter-attack, or they might be expecting to hold off. There we go, charging across open ground. Panzer Grenadiers realize that it's a bad spot to be in, so they quickly get into this building, ready for an all-route defense, and the riflemen quickly pull back towards the haystacks, not wanting to run into that, and the infantry half-track leichte Schützenpanzerwagen, usually meant for reconnaissance units, but of course if nothing else was around it will also be equipped to regular Panzer Grenadiers. So there you go. It was made by D-Mag, not Hanomag, which also gave the name for the medium half-track, the name Hanomag, which was sort of a nickname. I do believe it was given by the British. But there you have it, Schützenpanzerwagen, basically means armored personnel carrier. And the Panzer Grenadiers repair the half-track and get ready into it, and of course what do I do? Do I take on all of these riflemen, or do I react to these engineers over here with overwhelming firepower? Because of course, I'll just briefly pause here, this thing can of course provide me overwhelming firepower wherever I want, and that's one of the advantages of the Panzer Elite 1 you rarely see used, that of course I can use this half-track to quickly land wherever I want, reasonably swift, with a machine gun on top and two Panzer Grenadiers inside. I can quickly jump out, get a lot of firepower on one spot, for example, and then quickly move on to the next, and of course keep my troops reinforced at the same. It's really quite a punch you can have there if used properly, so keep that in mind and do not underestimate the power of an infantry half-track with Panzer Grenadiers in it. Usually you see some people just trying to use it as a sort of armored car or something like that, and usually it doesn't work too well either. Riflemen charging ahead, and of course quickly getting my Panzer Grenadiers out of that and engaging these engineers, blasting them down with quite a bit of success there. So I managed quite a small victory there. Of course I am forced to retreat from here, but at the same time I am managing to cut down this engineer team more or less. And of course my Kettenkrad, not a Schwimmwagen, I don't use that awfully a lot, I rather prefer the Kettenkrad. Half-track once more getting ready, going for this strategic cutoff point, and we are seeing BARs being equipped. Panzer Grenadiers arriving from the north. Gewehr 43s being equipped in larger numbers now, in fact. 3 teams so far. Infantry half-track rather unfortunately lands into a hornet's nest of automatic fire. Panzer Grenadiers arriving from the north, getting some shots off here. Riflemen standing out in the open against Panzer Grenadiers in light cover. Half-track once more moves in, some Panzer Grenadiers jump out, and a bit unfortunate there. The half-track can be a bit problematic in moving about. It can be a bit of a lopsided dance. Of course there are some pathing issues with it, which rather caused it to crash in there, I think. And it is rather one of the major issues of using the infantry half-track. And rather suffering some losses here, but still managed to cause some of the riflemen to get out of there in a rather expedient manner. Anti-tank half-track on the way, hooray for that. I rather like using it as a sort of very light assault gun, since it does have focused fire, which allows me to deal with infantry and other small strong points like that, and opening up on the engineers with flamethrowers to stop them from seizing my fuel point right here. Not having much luck with that, I'm afraid. Can't seem to hit anything because I'm not really feeling like using focused fire on that. Panzergrenadiers moving in to assist and taking here, while of course my Kettenkrad moves about, seizing all of that territory and of course denying the American as much fuel as possible. Panzergrenadiers engaging these riflemen here, sneaky buggers. Down to one man and then making a run for it and getting a second Kettenkrad, since of course I'm rather realizing at this moment I need to really begin upping up the whole seizing territory business. And of course Panzergrenadiers just don't cut it. They're worse than Volksgrenadiers. They're not really meant to secure territory, they're meant to kick the other guy's ass, to open up for the other chaps to seize territory. That's rather their business. And Kettenkrad moving in here, taking off this cutoff point after I've taken this. Of course, Kettenkrads can be rather nicely used to harass, but of course be careful with them, since they have absolutely no means to defend themselves. Anti-tank half-track moving in, rifleman charging in, and focused fire going off. One rifleman immediately cut down. And another killed by the anti-tank half-track, and its tiny 37mm anti-tank gun. And riflemen charging ahead while taking fire from the Panzergrenadiers in behind the wooden fence and the shrubbery. And Panzergrenadiers going down to heavy automatic fire. One rifleman team getting veterancy 1, of course. Only 4 kills is what you need with Panzergrenadiers to gain veterancy 1. So of course you also have to be careful with suffering losses on that account, since riflemen will rather quickly veteran up despite not having the supply yet upgrades. And my goodness, we are seeing hand grenades as well. Really going heavily for the infantry assault business there. Really putting off the pressure there. And of course the anti-tank half-track really doing its best to support my Panzergrenadiers, who are currently standing on the wrong side of the heavy cover. Of course now the engineers are moving in, which of course means any part of this heavy cover is the wrong side.
We must protect our munitions from enemy advances.
Kettenkrads unable to do much. Upgrade on the way for the Panzer Support Command. Shall I be getting the Panzer IV, or shall I be getting the Hotchkiss very light tank? And Panzergrenadiers once more marching out for the fatherland. And going for the Luftwaffe ground forces, calling upon the might of the 17th Luftwaffe Felddivision, or could possibly be calling upon some nearby Luftwaffe forces from a flak regiment, as they did have their own security forces to sort of provide security. So there you go. Could be just as well easily be that. And of course in such situation as in the Normandy invasion, they would usually quickly find themselves subordinated to the whatever Wehrmacht division that was nearby, although some of course tried to sort of dispute that by no, we're here to provide anti-aircraft cover. But in some cases rather ended in the officer trying to take command rather pointing a pistol at them. The infamous case being, well, I'll wait for that after this assault. Riflemen charging in with BARs, coming under quite a bit of fire. Anti-tank half-tank blasting away. Volksgrenadiers, Luftwaffe troops at the front. Grenades flying in, rather making this a rather hazardous venture, forcing them into a full retreat. And there we go, once more forced back. And let's shift over to the riflemen. Anti-tank half-track on the way. Nothing on the way from the Panzer Support Command, but let us briefly return to the whole, the famous case of the whole getting control over a Luftwaffe unit was. That was during one of the larger assaults by the British on Caen, where Major Hans von Luck rather found himself looking at a flak battery, 88 flak battery, standing up pointing at the sky when the British assault was moving in. He rather pointed out that he ought to be pointing at the ground, more specifically a rather nice open piece of terrain where the British would be arriving. The officer said no, he was here to protect the air. Major Hans von Luck pulled a pistol and pointed out that, I'll just pause here, of course, sorry for storytelling, but I really like this little story, that either he would get shot or he could earn himself a medal. He proceeded to earn himself a medal, actually, as that battery was able to put a pretty nasty dent in the British assault, knocking out many tanks. And back to the assault. Luftwaffe troops once more at the fore. Panzergrenadiers as well. These Luftwaffe troops are taking quite a beating and might be forced to retreat. And a Panzergrenadier is killed by a panel grenade, but now Also the cover is blown, making of course rather difficult for the riflemen standing up there against all of these panzer grenadiers. Something on the way from the panzer support command will probably be whatever piece of armor I'm calling in. Oh my goodness, I'm really talking today, aren't I? Anti-tank half-track moving in, panzer grenadiers securing this victory point, riflemen moving in from the east, anti-tank half-track moving up once more in support, 8 kills so far, not bad for a unit supposed to deal only with light armor. Of course it can again be used as a sort of light assault gun to be dealt with sort of strong points, heavy machine guns, and of course sneaky infantry. There we go, and what is this? Hotchkiss light tank moving to the rescue. Well, perhaps not so much, but there we go. 1 shot, 1 kill. The Hotchkiss is actually pretty decent at dealing with infantry, reasonably accurate after the buff. And it also has area of effect, or area... oh, whatever, AoE. So of course it... splash damage, there we have it. So of course it can actually kill more than one chap with 1 shot, which is rather unlike on the M8, or for example the Stuart light tanks. You might for example see in those rare cases it kills 2 or perhaps even 3 infantrymen, although they should be pretty wounded by then. Panzer grenadiers moving out, Luftwaffe troops once more heroically moving out, spurred on by the dashing commander and the 2nd Panzer Division Panzer Grenadiers, having co-opted the Hotchkiss from a training regiment somewhere in Normandy, as there were 2 actually operating with a combination of old German tanks and old French tanks. Airborne charging ahead, recoilless rifles equipped, making them rather nasty, but there we go. Panzer Grenadiers suppressing them. Luftwaffe troops pulling out of there, not wanting to get gunned down out in the open. Hotchkiss moves in as well, opens up, killing 1 rifleman right there. Of course, currently the riflemen have a rather nasty presence, currently holding most of the map. In fact, not looking awfully good for me, despite best attempts, really pushing hard with his riflemen, but at the same time he is suffering some heavier losses, while I'm sort of doing my best to rather keep those minimal. Hotchkiss taking 2 shots from the recoilless rifles, not looking good. Panzer Grenadiers also forced to retreat. Everything is forced to retreat. In fact, anti-tank paradox also being made ready. Anti-tank half-track kills a few more airborne, and the airborne being exhausted, don't get time to fire off, and of course, exhaustion means that they move slow, they can't see as far, and they're also less accurate. So that of course is something to keep in mind when you fire up your troops. And I also have these sort of defensive operations, of course increasing recovery of abilities, and of course cooldown, decreasing it, and also giving some healing there, and further Luftwaffe troops being called in. Although nothing to actually help them, they haven't been able to bring in their guns. Riflemen standing out in the open. Hotchkiss moving in from the north, continuing to fire away with its 37mm light gun. One of the 2 major light French tanks, the other one being the Renault 35. They were pretty much identical, except for small few details, including the fact that the Hotchkiss had a small upgrade, increasing the velocity of its gun. They also had a light machine gun, but that doesn't seem to have been carried in, because again, most hull machine guns and tanks don't really do anything in combat affairs anyways. Riflemen and airborne moving in, once more proving a threat to the 2nd Panzer Division. Lots of automatic weapons, and of course recoilless rifles. Panzer Grenadiers pulling out of there, Luftwaffe troops moving in, Hotchkiss as well, having been repaired, opening up once more, airborne coming under fire, 1 down, and Fallschirmjäger, 3rd Fallschirmjäger Regiment opening up in support as well as the 2nd Panzer Division presses onwards, and the riflemen are finding themselves in a rather nasty spot of trouble there. Luftwaffe troops gaining some veterancy as well. Veterancy 1, I rather prefer that, since of course that makes them more likely to hit and fire a bit faster, and I rather like my troops killing other chaps a bit faster. And of course with a BAR, of course that also gains those bonuses, so of course a bit more nice there, and of course makes my Luftwaffe a bit more lethal. No medic station up for the Americans or any mines, but we are seeing a tank depot coming up, rather meaning I'm going to be facing a spot of trouble there very soon. Riflemen win. Veterancy 2. Do we have any supply yet upgrades? No, interestingly enough. Could really help with veterancy, of course, since he's already close to veterancy 3. I'm waiting with those. Hotchkiss once more moving in, opening up with its light cannon. Airborne getting cut down. Panzer Grenadiers on a rather nice line there. Of course, a bit of danger for strafing round, but of course he doesn't have it, but I don't know. Of course I have to be careful with that, whence of course I know, due to the airborne, that oh yeah, he has airborne, but of course Luftwaffe fighting the airborne. fight of the airborne services. Luftwaffe troops laying down some barbed wire here to make these haystacks a little less accessible for the Americans. But looks like they're going to ignore that and move in from the west here. Not a bad spot to attack from, actually. Anti-tank half-track opening up once more. Hotchkiss is well ready to support. Turning around, although rear is exposed. Luftwaffe moving in. Fallschirmjäger, panzergrenadiers firing away at these riflemen, who are a bit exposed to all of this fire. In fact, taking heavy losses right out in the middle of everything. And there we go, getting absolutely gunned down. And Fallschirmjäger retreating, and that might have been an accident. Those do happen. Luftwaffe troops continuing to killing a bit, in fact. And the Hotchkiss still proving to be a bit of a nuisance to the Americans. Second Luftwaffe team moving out about here in the east, seizing territory wherever they can, and they can do this faster than the Panzer Grenadiers. And nothing out of the tank depot yet, but we are seeing the airborne once more on the move, ready for a raid. Finally stabilizing the situation here. Luftwaffe troops standing out in the open might want to retreat there. Not wanting to stand out against these airborne in the open, in particular since the Luftwaffe troops have taken a bit of damage there.
We have territory out of supply.
But I am securing a front right here along this line, along across the road, which is also sort of the normal thing. After quite a bit of fighting and quite a few losses. Of course, we'll have to see for how long that lasts. With that tank depot, I am quite unprepared for any sort of armored assets, or will it be slightly... I am expecting something, but I'm not entirely sure what. So I've gotten some tank busters to help with any sort of armored threats, and Luftwaffe troops laying down some barbed wire here to make any movement through that area a bit more difficult. Hip hip hooray. And looks like the riflemen and American forces are getting ready for another assault. Of course, I'm rather limiting the areas he can actually attack from, which of course to my advantage. Of course, that means I can concentrate my forces on the defensive, which of course is going to be only to my advantage. Luftwaffe troops laying down some sandbags. Always good with some prepared defenses in case you have to fall back, of course. Anything, really. And of course noting something going on here, so sending in everything, or most of what I have, keep leaving only a, well, bit there. Riflemen forced back, in fact rather realizing they are not prepared for all of this. And they are probably realizing there's a bit of barbed wire in the way there. Mines being laid down finally by Mr. JoelTurner and his... oh, what division were they from actually? I might have forgotten. Let's just say 25th Infantry Division then. But moving towards here in the north, in the south hanging about, and now just preparing for the offensive. Of course, he's rather feeling that now he might have lost the initiative a bit. I'm still not sure what's going on though, so I'm sort of mixed there. Luftwaffe troop laying down barbed wire, but coming under attack from the Americans in the north, forced back, but of course this sort of alerts me what's going on. Moving in, Fallschirmjäger and the anti-tank half-track double offensive veterancy, making it more likely to actually hit anything without focused fire. Hotchkiss also moving in, ready to support, while airborne are moving in from the south, coming under fire from the Panzer Grenadiers, although they do manage to kill one Panzer Grenadier, but are getting fired under suppressive volleys, and my goodness, killing two Panzer Grenadiers rather than quick succession. Anti-tank half-track moving in a bit boldly, perhaps a bit too boldly. And we are seeing a Sherman tank on the way, grenades being flung, airborne getting fired up. And of course is now really getting ready for the offensive, while these Luftwaffe troops are courageously holding the line, firing away with the rifles and their pilfered BAR. Grenades getting thrown at them though, and forced to retreat. Hotchkiss gaining veterancy, I think. Yes, there we go. Anti-tank half-track taking a bit of fire. Actual fire, in fact. Luftwaffe troops and everything moving in from the north. And now the Sherman charges in. That's bad news for me. Very bad news, in fact. Panzer Grenadiers will have to retreat before the Sherman puts an end to them. Anti-tank half-track immobilizing the Sherman by knocking out the treads and managing to destroy the engine as well. Hotchkiss moving in from the rear, opening up a few shots there through the lighter armor, but the anti-tank half-track goes up in smoke, and the Hotchkiss knocks out a rifle team, and I do believe we are halfway through the game, so it's time for the mid-game analysis by your ever handsome host, ImperialDane. Of course, what is the situation for the Americans? Well, currently he's holding half the map, but he doesn't hold the central victory point. That's rather to his disadvantage. But of course, at the same time, he has managed to send in a Sherman, but he wasn't able to support it. So now it's rather stranded in the middle of everything. Engine is on fire, the treads are gone, and things are not looking good. Of course, I don't really have much to oppose it. I have this Hotchkiss, but that's not going to do much against the Sherman in the long run. Tank busters moving in, but again, I'm going to need something heavier to deal with this Sherman, or that Sherman will prove to be the demise of the 2nd Panzer Division, which doesn't really have any panzers at the moment, rather ironically. But the American commander really needs to conserve his infantry, which is suffering rather heavily. He needs to get a medic station up. For example, right here behind the bocage would be a nice spot. And of course, laying down mines to sort of protect himself against any counterattacks is a brilliant move. But again, he really needs to conserve his troops a bit better. This rate of attrition is not showing as well, whereas I'm a bit better at actually keeping my troops alive, which is rather what I'm riding on, usually against Americans. And in fact, let's turn things around for me. My current major target is getting that Sherman out of the way. If I don't get that out of the way, he might get more, and then I'm really in trouble. Getting some tank busters out in larger numbers to sort of at least try to deal with it at that way currently. But of course, I'm probably going to need some miners from that Panzerjäger command. And by coincidence, of course, I do have it up, so I might just need the upgrade and the Marder freeze out. Then I might be able to deal with this, but of course, question is how long will that last, and of course those airborne will prove to be quite a threat for it. Another thing he might do is of course upgrade the supply yard. Otherwise I basically need to hold this and slightly probe forwards, and of course keeping him on the back foot. And let's return to the fight. Hotchkiss versus Sherman. Who shall win? Not the Hotchkiss, as it decides that discretion is the better part of valor. Tank busters moving in from the north, getting a nice shot off on the side with their Panzerschrecks. Sherman apparently not aware of what's going on though. But there we go. The Hotchkiss moves in to get a nice rear shot. And a strafing run on the tank busters. That was rather nasty. Killing one tank buster, but the last two are pinned down. They will have to retreat. Another down to high explosive shells. Hotchkiss moving in, hoping to get off another shot, but it misses. A rather bold Hotchkiss, considering that it is a tiny Hotchkiss versus the M4 Sherman. Luftwaffe troops and everything else getting ready for an assault from the north. Luftwaffe here getting offensive veterancy 2. Really getting to be some nasty buggers. And the Hotchkiss is quickly pulling out of there. Marder 3 on the way. Good job there. And getting ready to launch a major assault on the Sherman tank to sort of keep it preoccupied while my tank busters move in. Of course, there's probably going to be one tiny detail here. And there we go. Strafing run, pinning and killing. That was rather the problem in my plan there. And of course, I hadn't foreseen it. Engineer team though cut down while trying to repair the Sherman, so that's to my advantage. Luftwaffe troops will have to retreat. Come on, Luftwaffe troops, you've done so well. Oh dear, that was tragic. They're done so well, but they're lost. All due to my foolishness. Riflemen securing the center from the 2nd Panzer Division, but the Marder 3 has arrived on the field. That's going to be able to help me a bit against this devious Sherman tank, while my troops are once more getting reinforced and ready to charge into the field against the Americans. Fallschirmjägers with 8 kills so far, and the Hotchkiss moving in to support the Marder 3 and keep any infantry away with its nice and dandy main gun. Panzergrenadiers moving in from the north, but oh dear, Hotchkiss getting sticky bombed, and this might prove to be the end of the noble Hotchkiss. No, destroyed engine and airborne moving in, and there we go. Recoil this rocket through the rear, and the Hotchkiss is lost. But the Americans are suffering some losses while retreating. Good job there. Pushing through in both directions, not wanting to head up for another strafing run. Might want to spread out a bit more here. Veterancy getting continually further there. Half-track being blown to bits, and the Marder 3 moves up, locks down, and opens up on this M4 Sherman. And the main gun is destroyed, and there we go, finally knocking out the Sherman despite so many attempts. It took a third one before the M4 Sherman is lost to the might of the 2nd Panzer Division. And what is this? Further Luftwaffe troops being called in. I'm rather fond of it. I'm sort of trying to figure out that it might actually be the idea when facing lots of riflemen being thrown at you, then perhaps getting some Luftwaffe troops to really bolster your forces with numbers might actually do the trick. In particular if you can get some offensive infantry up for them. But there we go, repairing the Marder 3. Heavy machine gun on the way, having getting a supply drop but not accruing the mortar though, that's a bit interesting. Heavy machine gun setting up. Fallschirmjägers in ambush mode. Airborne moving in from the south under the cover of the 30 caliber. And JoelTurner's 25th Infantry troops moving in with the support of the 81st Airborne. Luftwaffe troops flanking about though. Nice job there, blasting away with double offensive veterancy and FG-42s. Fallschirmgewehr. Basically a light machine gun, but it could be used sort of as an assault rifle, rather interestingly. And we are seeing a large assault from the Americans across open ground against veteran infantry with semi-automatic weapons or something similar. And they are really getting cut down. They are doing their best to charge in. Panzergrenadier team though is lost, retrieving them too late. Oh dear, Luftwaffe troops also suffering rather heavily, but in the west they are doing a bit better against the Americans. Panzergrenadiers reporting they are under Beschuss, under fire. Marder 3 continuing to blast away, not hitting anything really. Looks like the airborne are some of the few remaining men, and there we go, Marder 3 killing a rifleman. Veteran 2 even, so that's a bit of a nice shot. And the Kettenkraut sneaking about behind enemy lines, seizing territory there, being a nuisance, so good job there to the driver. And of course, with all the mines, he won't suffer for that, because Kettenkrauts detect mines. So that's a rather nice thing. And once more charging ahead, and my goodness, we are seeing something out of the tank depot once more. Could it be another Sherman tank? And rather going for the Sherman tanks is of course a rather nice move for him, rather than trying to rely on tank destroyers, which rather has a tendency of failing when you're trying to use them as tanks, because they're not tanks. A strafing round moves in, pinning down the Panzergrenadiers and, well, a Fallschirmjägers and some tank busters. That was a rather heavy loss there for me. Still no medic station up for the American commander. But really has been a lot of back and forth at the moment. Kettenkraut really moving back and forth, harassing, cutting off points. Good job there. And we are seeing the Marder 3 moving. Well, not entirely sure why it's moving back and forth there. Might be sort of worrying that I can't protect it out there on the eastern flank. But I do notice this here machine gun, and I order the Marder 3 to just fire away. We'll of course have to see how that goes. So far not with much luck. Just blasting away at the building. And another M4 Sherman moving in for the attack. And getting a Panther battle group ready. Yarr. And the Sherman moving ahead, opening fire, and riflemen charging in large numbers under the aegis of the Sherman. More riflemen and airborne as well. Rather decent assault force there. Pulling back here towards that sandbags, which of course isn't really helpful in that direction. Some riflemen getting slowed down. The M3, the Marder 3 trying to move in, but it's getting gunned down. Fallschirmjägers taking heavy losses and will have to retreat. Panzer Schreck hitting the rear armor of the Sherman. Marder 3 opening up, doing a bit of damage, but oh dear, it might be too close. And there we go, main gun destroyed. Rather unfortunate move there. Airborne and riflemen charging in once more. Looks like the 2nd Panzer Division has been driven off the field once more. Marder 3 is aflame. It is lost. It is a ruin of wreck. A testament to my slightly forgetful nature. And there we go, full retreat, and I'm rather forced to retreat all of these troops and mount another counterattack before it ceases too much. At this stage, I feel that might prove too much. Of course, I'll also need to deal with this Sherman tank somehow. And my plan might be to rather get a Panther battle group to deal with that. In a rather sneaky manner, of course. Or then again, there's rarely anything sneaky about a Panther battle group. Just something rather nice as it punches through all the Americans. So a bit of a lull in the fighting as the 2nd Panzer Division gets ready once more. Fallschirmjägers, Panzergrenadiers and Luftwaffe troops, a rather motley battle group, Kampfgruppe on the way. And looks like this kitten crowd is coming under fire and gets knocked out rather unfortunately by the Sherman. It did not survive this bit of action, and Henschel strafing runs being made ready. The Luftwaffe actually able to provide a bit of air cover for the 2nd Panzer Division, which will of course prove to be of great surprise to everyone involved. And that's rather the reports when the Luftwaffe actually made its appearance. Normally then everybody was surprised, most particularly the German forces, since they'd rather given up on those chaps. Airborne charging in from the south. Luftwaffe troops once more finding themselves in the line of fire as the airborne move in. Veterancy 2 making them some rather nasty bastards, but Luftwaffe providing covering fire. Sherman with Veterancy 1 making it a bit of a nasty customer, and Luftwaffe troops once more taking heavy losses. Sherman blasting away with all glee and bloodlust, and another strafing run, pinning a lot and killing a few as well. Not looking good for this assault, forced into another retreat. Rather not good for me, once more forced off the field. Although we do have some panzergrenadiers marching in the west. 25th and Infantry Division doing quite well despite being a rather fresh division, not being a veteran division from North Africa and Italy. As there were some of those in Normandy as well. The Americans not sending in wholly unprepared divisions in. And those veteran American divisions weren't quite as tired of the war as the British ones. So that was of course a bit of an advantage there. But some veterancy 3 units now as well. Luftwaffe troops moving in. Everything in fact. And I do have the Henschel strafing run ready. And I'm rather hoping that I can use that properly to knock out that Sherman anti-tank. And now moving in as well, being airdropped it seems. And there we go. Henschel strafing run moving in from the north, blasting away with the 75mm gun. Doing quite a bit of damage to the Sherman, and let's see if it can't catch that 2nd strafing run as it moves in from the north, blasting away, and the Sherman is a goner. It is lost. The Luftwaffe saves the day. Hooray! Bit of a rarity, of course, but it does look rather impressive when the Luftwaffe moves in there. And of course, it is a bit easier to catch since you have a nice big fat notification in form of this circle on the minimap. Anti-tank gun being cleared out by brave panzergrenadiers and Luftwaffe troops, although that heavy machine gun providing covering fire from the building is making it rather difficult. So good job there. Assault moving in from all sides, in fact really doing the best to sort of put an end to this German assault. Grenades flying in, doing a bit of damage, but not enough it seems. And there we go, once more forced off the field, most tragically. But now it might be time for part 2 of this sneaky little plan. After the Luftwaffe managed to knock out this Sherman, it's time to call in the heavy armor. Well, technically the Panther was designated as medium armor, but you get the idea. It certainly wasn't a tiny tank. I'd certainly be surprised to see anyone claim that.
The Americans are capturing a sector.
But currently rather penned into my base, as you might have noticed, barely having any territory, which is really not good. But not giving up, once more charging out, as I am quite confident that I've been able to keep up the rate of attrition, which is rather giving me the advantage with my more veteran infantry. And the airborne, of course, not having really been able to do much to keep his troops alive in the longer run. Riflemen getting torn apart, grenades flying, killing one Panzer Grenadier, but that's it. Panzer Grenadiers keeping them down, and there we go from the north. The Panthers being sent in from the actual Panther regiment of the 2nd Panzer Division, opening fire with the high velocity 75mm guns. Jolly good show there. This is going to prove a nasty surprise for the Americans, opening up on the heavy machine gun in the building. Going to show them that team in there who's boss, blasting away. One gunner down, the rest will have to retreat lest they fancy getting blown to bits. There we go, another gunner down, but no. Heroically he continues firing away, and what is this? Anti-tank gun has been recruited, but the building is collapsed and the heavy machine gun team is lost. Another anti-tank gun being dropped in. This is rather unfortunate for me, and could easily end up badly for those Panthers, despite having a thick frontal armor. If those anti-tank guns begin using armor-piercing rounds. Things will not look good, so there we go, pulling back. In particular now, as riflemen with Infantry 2 are moving in. And Infantry 2 riflemen, and just pause for this, have increased sticky bomb range, so keep that in mind. You want to stay further away from those. And Panthers just blasting away for the fatherland, confident in victory for the 2nd Panzer Division. Anti-tank guns providing a nice front here against any armored units. Of course, if he is unable to keep them safe though from any infantry pushes, he might be facing some larger problems though. So of course he needs to keep them safe. An idea might, for example, be to place a machine gun emplacement behind them. Could work, of course. A mortar is going to be of help actually, but then again getting some medic stations as well would be. Fallschirmjägers charging in. Fallschirmjäger versus the airborne, and the Fallschirmjägers are winning quite nicely despite getting suppressed. And Panther moving in, getting off a nice shot. The attack is not stopping, although it is slowing down a bit, owing to that nasty strafing run. And no, there we go, it stopped once more. Panther blasting away, getting riflemen with hopefully some of its shots. The Panther actually being rather decent at dealing with infantry as well. Not perhaps as well as the Panzer IV with the better high explosive shells or the tank, but still it can manage alright. There we go, panzergrenadiers with Infantry 3 moving in, and once more getting this force ready. Luftwaffe troops repairing. And anti-tank gun rather exposed, and of course that was rather what I was talking about. You don't want them to be caught out in the open when your opponent has Panthers, or generally on this sort of armor, and of course that looks like that anti-tank gun might be lost to these rather expert marksman panzergrenadiers, what with offensive Infantry 3, and there we go. I think he might be a bit excessive there, using a strafing run for that, and let's switch over to him in fact. And in fact he used the only strafing run he can afford in quite some time for that, in fact. So I feel that backfired. Panthers moving in, one taking a bit of damage, but the second one still stands. Opening away, Luftwaffe troops, Fallschirmjägers, panzergrenadiers, everything just blasting away, tearing apart those riflemen out in the open again. Not having prepared any defenses, no sandbags, no barbed wire, no mines in further detail here, which would rather again be the sort of expected bit to be. Now his second anti-tank gun being cleared out. Things are not looking good. No further armor on the way either. No further strafing runs to actually have dealt with this larger force of infantry. And now of course my Panthers are free to do whatever they want to his infantry. There we go. In fact, negative covers in the last place you want to be. So of course the Panther can just fire away with glee and happiness, killing airborne, killing riflemen, in fact gaining offensive infantry, meaning it's going to fire a bit faster, and of course be more likely to hit. Grenades flying, and the mortar team itself has also been exposed. Also not rather fortunate. Panther moving in, hoping to flank or not. So I managed to drive the enemy off the field, although I don't really have most of the map at the moment.
We're losing a strategic sector.
Still been quite a fight, and now we see the sort of thing that happened with a lot of airborne. They just basically end up having a small armory in their base, lots of heavy machine guns, lots of mortars, but no one's actually using them. Although at least he is using some of his mortars and heavy machine guns, so that's at least something in his favor. Panther getting repaired, second as well, although having a bit of trouble sparing repair troops for that. And something on the way from the Panzerjäger command. Group Seal, in fact, going to make my panzergrenadiers tougher, in particular if they group up. We're returning to JoelTurner again briefly, just curious. Fallschirmjägers opening up on these riflemen out in the open, although not looking good, and in fact forced retreat. But the Panther fires in return, and there we go. And hitting a mine right there, that was a bit fun. And the Panther hits a mine, that was rather unfortunate. Damaged engine, but panzergrenadiers are ready to move in to support the Panzer, which was rather their job in part. And American infantry exposed out in the open, mortar firing support, a rather nice assault here. Although at the same time against these Panthers you might be facing some difficulties without support. Strafing run moving in, pinning down one Panzer Grenadier, suppressing the rest. Panthers continuing to fight away, and from the south, riflemen moving in. Veterans free, my goodness, but a friendly fire hit from the mortar saves the day for the 2nd Panzer Division, rather fortunately there. Airborne getting caught up in infantry, desperately trying to knock out those Panthers from the side, but they're not having any luck and are forced to retreat. My goodness, the mortar though continues to fire. Riflemen and engineers moving in from the west. The fight continues, it seems, but really it looks like I've managed to break the back of the American effort with those Panthers. There we go, another assault. Engineers without flamethrowers though. And getting torn apart by panzergrenadiers and Panthers, and the Panthers crash through the bocage. For who? The mortar team. Having tired of its antics, it opens fires with its 75mm gun, hoping to crush it and show it who's boss, but apparently he can't hit anything. And apparently the mortar can't either, but an anti-tank gun opens up and supportive fire. Nice job there, hitting the weaker side armor of the Panther, and of course the Panther did have rather weakened side armor that was actually meant to sort of decrease the weight and of course keep the speed up, which rather meant that Panzer commanders were advised to actually keep the front continuing towards the enemy, which was also thick and sloped. In fact, the turret had about 110mm of armor, which actually made it rather thick there in the front. Fallschirmjägers moving in against the anti-tank gun, hoping to clear that up the way for the Panthers, although that one still needs repairs for its engines. Incendiary grenade being dropped on the anti-tank gun, clearing it out, and of course ensuring anyone can't take it right away either. Airborne firing away alongside the riflemen. Panthers not getting repaired. Luftwaffe troops are nowhere to be seen. Perhaps they have run off, perhaps they're hiding. Assault once more. Fallschirmjägers and airborne meeting once more in the field as panzergrenadiers and riflemen clash as well. Riflemen getting cut apart. Airborne lost as well. Still no supply yard upgrades. I rather can't help but feel that might be one of the reasons for his loss. With impending loss, as you might be noticing, he isn't really winning anymore. Panthers rather cementing the deal for me. And finally getting them repaired. Hooray!
Stand up, airborne! Rally on me!
We're losing ground out there.
This would be the quiet part of the war.
There we go, always some fun bits to be mentioned. The mortar team in this case saying this was supposed to be the quiet part of the war. Or at least he said they were told, so again always fun. And well, it was actually the truth about the Ardennes in some cases, where they were told to in fact that this was the quiet part of the war, and then of course they get hit by SS Panzer Divisions, which is rather the opposite of quiet part. Of course, fun bits about World War II. And looks like though that our good friend JoelTurner is not a lazy American commander. Once more he's getting ready for the attack. He would certainly makes the US Army proud. And he'd certainly also make a good SS commander, I'd say, with that level of aggression, although at the same time he's not mastering the attrition aspect of this. No medic stations, no supply yet upgrades either, which I rather feel is counterproductive for him. Otherwise he actually did quite well. And now with Veterans 3 riflemen leading the charge, Fallschirmjägers in ambush. Oh, the one is exposed, but there we go, opening up from ambush, and of course Fallschirmjägers in ambush get a bonus when they do so, making them even more lethal. And there we go, Veterans 3 riflemen just getting torn apart in seconds. Panthers once more opening up, and once more he's rather coming to short against the Panzers of the 2nd Panzer Division. Fallschirmjägers also having fun. Luftwaffe troops, Panzer Grenadiers really charging ahead, hoping to really get some sticky bombs off, or at least something else. Bombing run moving in, my goodness. And the Panther actually gets hit, but it was out of it, and an infantry team is lost to the Panther fire, my goodness. And the Panthers just don't let up. And the mortar, my goodness, also fires. And there we go. The American effort has crumbled. Finally, the 25th Panzer Division, 25th Infantry Division, my goodness, I can't seem to talk at the moment, is forced to retreat in the face of the 2nd Panzer Division onslaught as they retake the crossroads lost by the other commander yesterday. So, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this fight. If you did, why not subscribe or tell your friends? And if you didn't, well, why not send in a replay of your own? And of course, what happened here? What could have been done better? And what of course interesting? Well, of course, the American was quite aggressive from the start, really letting on, pushing on with riflemen, BARs, mines, grenades, everything. One trouble though, he wasn't really prepared for the attrition aspect. And of course, when you're fighting this sort of opponent, you really need to be able to quickly get out of there when you know that things are not in your odds. And really, when you're fighting in a situation like this, you really need to stack the odds in your favor constantly, which of course something like the infantry half-track can do, since you can quickly move about to one spot to the next and get the advantage there. That's essentially also a part of the blitzkrieg, not just striking hard at one spot, but striking hardest at the weakest spot, of course where things are most at your advantage. And of course panzer grenades and an infantry half-track really embody that partly. So of course I was partly able to use that, avoiding his main blob until of course I forced him to spread out, and then I struck. Then I did some damage, forced him back, and of course that sort of shifted back and forth until I got the Panthers. But in between that, when he did gain all of that territory, he wasn't too good at defending it. No sandbags, no barbed wire, no mines, and of course he didn't prepare for the attrition aspect. No medic stations and no supply yards, and I really think no medic station, no supply yard really bit him in the arse. Good use of the Shermans, so didn't go for tank destroyers, which is rather a pitfall that a lot of American commanders go in thinking, oh right, I'm tank destroyer, that has tank in it, clearly it must be a tank. No, it's not, it's a tank destroyer. It's a bit not too well at dealing with infantry, keep that in mind. Of course the Panther is not a tank destroyer, it's a tank, it's not too well at dealing with infantry, but still it can do it, and it did rather nicely here. In fact both Panthers did, which was also rather nice. Of course, one thing I also used was Luftwaffe troops to sort of increase the amount of firepower to sort of aid the panzergrenadiers, and that actually also helped a bit, I feel. Of course, might be wrong, but the more firepower, the better, and of course they could lay down barbed wire and repair my vehicles. And of course the anti-tank half-track wasn't a bad bet either. So there you go, I hope you enjoyed this fight, and cheers!